guys, it's Lorty and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be making some more snaky content for you. I actually posted a little bit more about Haru on my Instagram page, and a bunch of people that I know started asking me about ball python care and their enclosure and what goes into keeping them as pets because they were really interested in him. That's no surprise, he's absolutely adorable. So I thought I would make this video to show you guys how I have my current ball python set up and what I did for my first snake. I do have some ideas for him for the future, so he's not gonna be staying in this tub setup for much longer. I do have a rack system on the way for him, which I will be building and showing you guys when it comes in. But for right now, this is the environment that I chose to house my ball python in, and I'm really happy with it. I think it's great for him, and I want to show you guys how I made it. So if you are interested in seeing that or setting up a ball python enclosure, then keep on watching. Okay, so I have here with me my ball python enclosure, which is this Sterilite tub. And I purchased this tub for $12.99 at Target. I was drawn to it because it's the perfect size for a juvenile ball python, which mine is currently. And it does have a lid with latch closures on all sides. So when you go to buy a tub, whether it be from Walmart or Target or wherever you're gonna get a storage bin, you're probably gonna see a lot of tubs that only latch on two sides, so here and here, or you might find some that don't even have the clip latches like this one does, but that just kind of seal down across the whole span of the tub. You really want to try to avoid those because even as a young juvenile ball python, these guys are really strong and really good at escaping their environment. So they can kind of weasel their nose into the cracks of the tub and kind of force and push it open and get their bodies out of it, which would then allow them to escape into your home, which is never good. Ball pythons are not typically going to be a threat to people, children, animals, things like that. But unfortunately, if they get into the wrong space, they can severely injure themselves or even die. So it is really important to look for a tub that, if it's a long tub, you're going to want to make sure it has latches on the longer sides too. And if it's a shorter one like this, you can probably get away with just having the latches on either of these two sides, just because your juvenile is probably gonna have a difficult time prying his way out of there. But I would still urge you to look for a tub that has clips on all sides of the tub like this one does. And again, I got this one at Target for only $12.99. So once you've gotten your tub and you're confident that the top is gonna seal down with no issues, you're gonna drill holes into it. And for mine, I drilled 2 sets of holes, top and bottom, all the way around this tub. I don't know if you can kind of see the size of the holes there. They're not large enough where the snake can get his nose through, but they are big enough that they're gonna allow a decent amount of air circulation to go through here. I would recommend starting with just 1 row of holes all the way around and let the tub sit for a day or two, just so you can kind of get an idea of how much humidity it's gonna hold, because it's always easier to go back and reduce humidity by adding more holes later than it is to try to increase humidity by patching up the holes you've already drilled. One important thing that I will note, because I actually have done 2 of these now, the first one was a flop, is that when you drill your tub, my hand is the drill, you want to drill not from the outside in, but from the inside out. So you want to take your drill from the inside of the tub and drill the holes outward, because as you keep drilling, the bit is going to start to get less sharp. And what ends up happening is the plastic starts to become really serrated on the edges of the hole. So the first few 10 holes that you drill are going to be really perfect and clean with no plastic residue or sharp areas on the outside of the ridges. And then as the drill starts to wear down, the plastic is going to have kind of this textured, sharper plastic lip edge around the hole. If it's on the outside of the tub, the snake's not going to have the potential to rub up against those sharper plastic bits and cause a scratch to his eye, to his body, his scales, etc. The smooth end is on the inside. But on the outside, you can still pick the plastic bits off. That's what I did. I did try to smooth them as much as I could. But since this is clear plastic, if you were to try to sand this at all you're really gonna end up doing is roughing up the plastic and scratching it, and it's not gonna look very good. So pro tip, drill from the inside out. You can pick off the pieces of plastic that are around the edges of the holes, but when you drill from the inside out, it's gonna prevent those sharper pieces from being on the inside where your snake can accidentally rub up against them and hurt itself. The next thing I did with my tub after drilling holes is I installed a heat mat. And this mat is a Zoo Med. I don't know if you guys can see that there. It's just a Zoo Med heat pad that I picked up at my local PetSmart. And I wanted something that was going to cover about 1/3 of this tub. The mat cannot be used by itself. That's something really important to remember. I'm so glad I did my research on this because I find it really confusing when you go to the pet store and they're like, yeah, your snake just needs a heating pad for the bottom of the enclosure and he'll be good. You're like, okay, perfect. But what they don't tell you is this heat mat just gets indiscriminately hot. You have absolutely no control over the temperature of this mat, and there's really no way to regulate the heat that's being output from this mat. So it might be too cold for your reptile, depending on how close it is to them, or what kind of substrate you have, or what kind of material your enclosure is made of, whether it's glass or plastic like this. It might be getting too hot or too cold. It can burn the animal. It can start shit on fire. It's just not a good scenario. And so I think it's really important that people understand these heat mats cannot be used independently. They must go into a thermostat. The thermostat that I got for it, and I'm sorry it's so crude with all these wires here, but I have it actually hooked up and I am using this currently. This is a Zoo Med thermostat, and it just has a temperature control on the front. This is a very basic one. I paid about $40 for this. You can get them even cheaper. And it has a plug on the very front of it, which I will show you how this works. So thermostat plugs into your wall, and your heat mat, which is this plug here, plugs into the thermostat. Now what this will do is it will regulate the temperature of your heat mat. How does it do this? So as you can tell, I have the big cord, which is the power source running to my thermostat, and I have a smaller, thinner cord, and this is the probe from the thermostat. So the thermostat has a probe that fits inside the mat. The probe is what tells the thermostat how hot the heat mat is actually getting. So if the probe is not either directly underneath the heat mat or somewhere very close to the area, it's not gonna read the temperature correctly, and again, you could get too cold or you could get too hot with your reptile. I don't know how well you can see this, but there is the probe right here. Some snake owners like to put the probe actually inside of the tub by fastening it with a suction cup or even taping it down with some duct tape. Having duct tape in here would increase the risk of it eventually peeling up and getting stuck to your animal, which for a scaly reptile could be really bad for them. It can rip off scales and really harm them and cause them quite a bit of damage. So you want to keep things that are sticky and adhesive away from the inside of the enclosure where the snake could possibly get stuck to it. I got some advice from some more experienced reptile keepers and breeders on a Facebook group, and one of them was like, absolutely do not put the probe in here. The reason for that is when the snake lays on top of the probe, it can actually influence the probe's temperature reading and make it less accurate. Substrate and things like that can also get moved around on the probe and cause the temperature to fluctuate. Said, take the probe from the outside and stick it directly into the pad. So that is what I have done. I put my pad on the outside, I stuffed the probe into the pad, and then it's pretty much just kind of secured in there by the pad. The Zoo Med pads also come with a sheet of paper covering the sticky adhesive side here. And I removed mine right away because I was kind of fiddling with it, but in hindsight, I probably would have left the paper backing on here so that it wasn't sticky. The reason is when you stick it to the tub, it's kind of inconsistent the way it sticks down, and I don't really like the way it heats the plastic directly. So I prefer to peel them off, stick my hand to them a few times, get them less sticky, and then just kind of place it on the tub and tape it there instead of sticking the pad down to the plastic, if that makes sense. So what I've done here is my pad does have a gap in between itself and the plastic. It's kind of more tight against the plastic in some places, but for the most part, there's a little bit of airflow going through. And to make sure the pad stays in place, I've adhered it with some heat tape. My pad's never gonna get that hot where it's gonna cause this tub to melt, because again, I have a thermometer regulating the heat going to this item. But just as a safety precaution, instead of using duct tape, I am using Flex Fix, and this is just a heat resistant tape that you can buy at your local hardware store. It's really no different than duct tape other than the heat qualities of this can resist high temperatures. That's pretty much the most complicated part of this tub. Once you have your heat mat installed, it's time to make sure that your temperatures are correct. So one of the standards for a ball python's heat element is going to be a cool side or an ambient temperature that ranges anywhere between about 75 to 80 degrees, and a warm side of the tub with a belly basking temperature spot that ranges anywhere from about 88 to 96 degrees. So you can play a bit with the temperature range there. Things like how closely the pad is actually adhered to the bottom of the tub and how thick your substrate are and what kind of substrate you're using are going to affect how hot it gets. You want to be careful. You might get a reading of 90 degrees on the top of your substrate, but once you've moved all of this away, it might read 104 degrees on this plastic part right here, which if the snake ever moved the substrate enough or got down to this spot, they could really seriously burn and injure themselves if it was too hot below the substrate that you had on the surface. This guy right here is probably one of the most essential tools to a snake you can possibly have, and this is a temp gun. I'm gonna link you guys to this one in the comment section below. I purchased mine on Amazon. It was like $15, and this thing is a freaking lifesaver. There's absolutely no way to adjust your temperatures inside of your enclosure effectively without this tool, because it's just not accurate to use any other sort of thermometer or probe gauge. This is gonna be the thing you want. So I'm gonna take this tool and I'm gonna measure the temperature on my warm side. You guys can see the little red light going across that heat mat there. Right now it's reading 79 degrees because my thermometer is not even connected to a power source, so it's cooling down. But I would like this ideally to read anywhere between 90 and 93 degrees. For the cool side of your enclosure, it's definitely more helpful to have a hygrometer, but this does also come in handy. And I can just zap anywhere in the environment, whether it's one of his hides or near the dish or even just in that general area on the substrate, and it should read anywhere between about 75 and 80 degrees. Although the temperature settings seem really simple and people will be like, oh yeah, just get a temp gun and put a heat pad on and make sure it's this temperature, nobody tells you about all of the environmental factors that will happen, such as different substrates, how close you have the heating pad to the bin, what kind of material your environment's made out of, whether it's glass or plastic. I remember when I first installed my heat mat, I was literally temp gunning this thing every 10 minutes, freaking out because I couldn't get the temperature to be between that really sweet spot of about 90 to 93 degrees that I wanted the belly basking spot to be, because things like substrate affect that. A lot of people say, hey, if the snake is not warm enough, it will move the substrate to be able to get to that warmer spot. But because I do use paper towels, it'd be a little bit more challenging for him to move these out of the way in order to get to that warmer place. So I am really careful that once I have my paper towel set on top of there and I let the tub set for a while, that I go back and I test the temperature on the surface of that paper towel to make sure it's within range. And if it's not, I turn my thermostat up a little bit more. One important thing to know about the way your tub, your substrate, the probe, the mat, and your thermostat are all gonna work together for the heating element of this tub is that this thermometer might be set a lot higher than you would think. For me personally, I keep my thermostat on about 94 degrees. Even though my ideal sweet spot is about 90 degrees for his belly basking spot, I find that keeping this around 93 to 94 on the heat setting is what really makes it that temperature inside the tub. The biggest thing you can do is just play with the varying degrees of temperature. Obviously, you're not gonna set this to 105 and then go from there. You're gonna start on a lower setting at like 90, 91 degrees, and if it's still too cool with the substrate, you're gonna increase it on your thermostat so that it increases here as well, and just kind of play with it. But again, there's absolutely no way you can get an accurate temperature reading inside the tub, even with the thermostat connected, unless you have a temp gun to know exactly what your temperatures are all the time. Okay guys, now that we have all the heating elements established in our tub and everything's working well, we're gonna start adding the other elements into the snake's environment, which are gonna be really simple to do. So as far as substrate goes, you can use a lot of different kinds, do your research on them, but in this video, I'm just gonna be showing you paper towel substrates. They're cheap, they're inexpensive, they're easy, you just grab them out of there, you throw them in, and you're done. I'm gonna add my paper towel substrate. I just take one sheet for my warm side and I lay it down right over my warm side's heating element. And then I'm gonna take a few more sheets. I've got some already made up here. I'll double up my sheets. So instead of just using one, I'll do two on the cool side, just because I can. It doesn't really matter. If you were to start doubling these up on the warm side, you're gonna wanna check the accuracy of how warm the belly basking spot is, because the more substrate you're adding, the more the heat's gonna have to travel through it to get to the snake. So you might have to increase your temperatures, which I don't feel like doing that. So I just use one simple piece of substrate over there. And then I do make it a little bit more plush on the cool side. And that's what it looks like. Paper towel substrate, amazing. The next thing I'm gonna add to my snake's enclosure are a couple of hides. These are appropriate for his current juvenile size. I paid about $4 each for these. They're just little breeder hides, and you can usually get them at your local reptile supply. But if you don't have one in your area, I'm gonna be linking you to a bunch of these items in the comment section below, so definitely check them out. Basically, right where my heat mat is, I'm gonna put the warm hide. It goes directly on top of the heat mat. And then on the cool side of the enclosure, I'm gonna place the cool hide, so that he can go between these two hides throughout the day, back and forth, to regulate his body temperature. Last but not least, for the inner part of the tub, I'm gonna be adding a water dish. As you can see, the hide and the water dish are almost the same size, so this is a very large water dish. For most species of snakes, you do want a water dish large enough for the snake to soak their body in. For ball pythons, that's not really the case. Ball pythons are not a soaking type species, and if you see them soaking, typically because something's wrong. But I do like to provide a lot of water for him to drink, and it also helps raise up the humidity in your tank. If you're having issues with humidity in your tub, you could even put this water dish on the hot side where it will evaporate quicker, causing there to be a buildup of humidity. If you've got way too much humidity, you'll want to keep the water dish on the cool side and maybe reduce the size of how big the water dish is. For me, this larger water dish is perfect for this enclosure. It really helps me maintain my humidity in a drier climate where I live, and it provides a lot of surface space for my snake to drink from, because I do want him to drink a lot of water, and it fits perfectly in my tub. So the final thing I'm gonna add to this tub, which is also equally as important as my heating element and making sure that the temperatures are correct, is making sure that my ambient temperatures and humidity are correct. Now, a lot of people would go to the store and buy those little like $12 or $20 thermometers that have like a Velcro backing and would stick somewhere inside of the enclosure, and they just have the little arms that rotate around to tell you exactly what the temperature is and where your humidity's at. They don't work at all. They're a total crock of shit. They're completely inaccurate. I know this because when I got one and compared it to a real hygrometer, it was so off, it was unbelievable. So this is the hygrometer that I'm gonna be recommending to you guys. I will put this item specifically in the comment section down below because it does have kind of an unusual name, but this came highly recommended by several breeders that I got in touch with, and it was really cheap. It's completely effective. It is battery operated, and then it has this long cord for a probe. This is the same probe that I stuck inside of my heat mat, very similar. But this one, I just put on like the lid of my enclosure, I throw the probe right inside the tub, and I close it up. And what this little probe does is it's reading the ambient temperature, and it's also measuring the humidity level inside the tub very, very accurately, much more accurately than any Velcro or stick-on thermometer or digital thermometer that you could place into this tub would. They're pretty much garbage. Don't waste your money on them, but definitely invest in this specific hygrometer. This thing is awesome and it's completely accurate. Let's take little Haru out of his to-go container. I've had him in here for the video just because I didn't want him slithering away. My house is very big. There's not a lot of places for him to hide in here. I don't have a ton of furniture, but I didn't want him to get underneath something that he shouldn't be under. So I do use his little store container that I brought him home in. Here's the snake that I keep inside of this tub. He is a juvenile banana pied ball python and his name is Haru. I introduced him to you guys in another video. He really loves his environment in there. It's awesome for him and he's been thriving in there. I'm really excited to have this little home for him. Like I have said before though, I am transitioning away from this particular tub setup and into a snake rack with tubs in it, just because I do want to house multiple ball pythons. And for me, this tub setup is a little bit difficult to have multiples of, just because you have to have different thermostats, different heating elements, different probes, different hides, and all of that stuff. As where the pre-built snake racks, you know, they have a water dish already molded into the plastic. They don't need any hides because it's an opaque tub, so the whole thing is a hide in and of itself. And I just really like the way that the snake racks are, although I do not have one. So hopefully when mine comes in, I'm gonna like it just as much, and I hope that Haru really likes it too. Just remember too, you can always go crazy and really decorate and make a lot of behavioral enrichments in your tub. You can add logs in there, you can add sticks, you can put in some aspen bedding substrate, you can do fake leaves. For mine personally, I just like to keep it really simple and sanitary, and I don't feel that it takes away from the behavioral enrichment of my snake, just because I do hold him and interact with him so often. So as far as not having, you know, sticks and leaves and things like that in my tub, I don't think he really minds. I think how basic it is keeps it really nice and sanitary, and he gets a lot of attention and enrichment from me every single day. So that is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing. I hope you enjoyed seeing the little dude here and everything that I put into his enclosure. If you were thinking about making a tub setup for your ball python, I really hope that this helped you. Feel free to leave any comments or questions in the comment section down below, and I will try to answer them the best I can. But again, do your research, go crazy, look up as much information as you can before you buy one, and make sure it's the right pet for you. But I hope that if you are considering getting a snake, you will go for a ball python. You will not be disappointed. But that is it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Hi. Can I have my hair back now? You are a nice hair tie.